is reverse resolution. So I'm not going to try and start a big discussion about it, but I just wanted to point it out as a significant concern. If your client does reverse resolution, then it should also forward resolve the result and check that it actually maps. Because otherwise it's too easy for somebody to say, this address is my etherwallet.eth, and your client shows it and the user trusts that that's the case.
Is it a function of ENS for to do
ENS
lookups in for reverse? Or?
ENS supports the reverse lookups built in, but it doesn't attempt to enforce that mapping is true. So you can claim anything you like.
And that can also be very useful for like resolving typos. So for example, if you type most of like Ethereum list types like Ethereum or Ethereum, it will check that it points to Ethereum Foundation, and then it will simply rename your. So if you type on this Ethereum, it will rename Ethereum Foundation because it points and then goes back to.
Oh, you mean if you enter a typo that you've registered?
Yes.
Then it goes.
Yeah.
It's effectively a set of redirect.
What it is, I pointed all of my typos to the Ethereum Foundation picture, and the Ethereum Foundation picture calls itself the Ethereum Foundation picture.
So yeah, that's a good point. There can be a reason why the reverse lookup would be different. So you've got two situations. One is the user enters an address and do a reverse lookup to see what to call it, in which case you should then do a forward lookup to prove that that's correct. Or the user enters a name, in which case you can do a reverse lookup on the address you got in order to show a canonical name in the case that you have many names legitimately pointing at the same address and you want to show which of them is the authoritative one. So I'm going to add a to-do list item for myself to add back to the official client implementation recommendations, but for anyone here who's a client implementer, it's worth bearing in mind. So the next session is further developments on permanent registrar desiderata, because a significant number of us felt that we didn't cover it in enough detail yesterday. Does anybody want to summarise their impression of our conclusions from yesterday?
What I would like to do is go to the board and start listing the main things that we want out of the characteristic that we want out of the next permanent registrar. Look, unless you want to do some other thing, we could do that.
We kind of did that yesterday a little bit. I don't remember.
We were sort of trying to do that, but no,
did we come out with conclusions?
No, your technique was saying mostly why names are why names are not free. Right? That's what's on the board here.
So we did come up with one conclusion, which was your suggestion of using release rates to calculate a minimum bid and a cost of rent. But there's a lot more that we can solidify. So that seems like a reasonable start.
What I think we are trying to do here is we have like the auction, we have the rent, we have a lot of like different parameters that we are trying to optimize. We have like
there's one. People have walked off and play with them. Oh, the eraser.
Eraser, yes, that's what I'm looking for. So we have the auction, we have the rent, we have a lot of parameters that we can play with, and we want to play with, and like we have the whole burn versus hold versus stake versus send somewhere. And I would say that the things that we want to change in the next register would be, tell me if you, one of the things I would say is have some sort of rent that helps an utility function, right? Have some sort of rent that forces the owner to eventually, like periodically think about, do I want to keep this name or do I want to release it? Rent for utility.
Or basically like incentive to release.
Yes, incentive to release.
Yeah, and basically like there's two kind of incentives to the release that we have talked about. One of them is like rent or like renewal fees.
Or getting something
your
back.
Deposit back.
Or getting a deposit back. The second thing I think a lot of people were talking is also have some sort of system in which for undisputed names, you have a more simplified process, right? And it doesn't need to mean that those are two systems. Maybe there is a way for the auction to, if you find a way for the auction to review itself, then if I make a bid and after like 48 hours or 34 hours, I am the only one who has the bid, then automatically I won the bid. I don't need to like go there and reveal it and something like that, right? So make a system that if there's only one person that wants that name, then that person gets it and he doesn't need to do anything else. But if there are disputes, we have disputes, right? I would call that simplified. I need more. That has one bidder. Is there anything else that you think we could put up here? Or things we want out of that name registrar, right?
Yeah, we kind of wanted one of these grace periods after
Yep.
rent runs out.
Yes.
Or
whatever. Yeah.
Renewal period.
Great
or whatever.
point.
2 periods.
Yeah,
First,
what's the
the
grace
ability to renew it, but it.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is like in more general terms is you don't want to surprise people, right? If you don't want for someone to suddenly realize that they've lost their names, right?
I mean, I think we can be more specific. We want the name to turn off, stop resolving before they lose ownership.
Yeah, how do
Okay.
you do that functionally?
In block numbers.
It's got to be in the resolver.
It's got to be in the resolver already.
Oh, you can allow someone to eliminate resolvers without changing the name.
You can take the resolver away for the name.
I'm gonna just call this grace periods.
Yeah.
But the idea behind it is that whatever we have here is something that won't be surprising and won't be something that people will have the information 6 months to a year in advance that they know that they need to do something. And that can be a grace period. Maybe the grace period actually lasts a year in which like a whole full year the person can still like renew it or something like that, right?
So hopefully less than a year.
Yeah, but I mean, there must be a very long grace period that it's not about like someone simply forgetting.
It's like
Yeah,
90 days in .com world. Like the 2 grace periods.
Yeah, okay. We're talking about different things. Like 90 days is the grace period, but if I want to renew my name, I can probably go in there and renew it for 4 years.
Oh yeah.
Right.
But that's not the grace period. That's
like
that's kind of like the amount of time that you prepay for, or the amount of
It's a
time
time
you're
to
guaranteed
make the
have to be
decision.
registered for, or the amount of time you need to leave your deposit in. Basically, it's the minimum amount of time you can register a name for.
Yeah, but my point is that we want that there is a time to make the decision, that you can make the time, and there's not something that suddenly there's a high rent
You have
spike.
certainty about when, at
Okay,
latest, or not earliest, when at earliest,
Predictability, maybe. Predictability
when at
of
earliest your
prices.
name will expire.
No, I don't think predictability, because
It's
a
built-in
system which is
safety.
completely brutal is still predictable.
It's built-in safety, knowing how people behave.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
So I think I kind of said it. People need to know the worst case, earliest time they need to renew.
Okay, well,
Is this also encapsulating the pre-commitments for sort of subdomain holder kind of safety?
well, I would say that
If you want to be clever, you can start the auction process during that time too. It's just that if it gets reclaimed by the end, everybody gets a
That's
refund.
clever.
Well, we were talking about having 2 grace periods, one of which your domain still resolves and you have an opportunity to get it back before you lose it, and one of which your domain no longer resolves and is like a guaranteed idle period, if you like, so that things definitely break before they get changed.
Oh,
And you can start the
no, no,
auction.
the-
I thought we were talking about
you-
one where it doesn't resolve and you can renew it, and then one where it doesn't resolve and you can't.
so actually,
So during the period where you can't renew it, you can do the auction then.
You
because you
can
know
still
that
start
it's-
the auction.
so actually it's going to be an
Just that it
option to
can't-
renew. Like you can't just do an instant.
No,
No, so
if you are the person who held that name, you can just renew.
Yeah.
Fair
But
play.
if you wait too
field.
long, then the auction is gonna like the result of the auction is wrong.
So there's.
well, maybe, I mean, that's also.
The auction can start blowing you into the
Yeah.
first grace period.
Yep.
And then it'll just like throw.
Yeah, but
if they ever.
But then you don't want people to have like hold their
Sorry.
funds for 6 months.
Yeah,
Yeah,
secondary
well,
grace period.
You know, it doesn't really matter that much, right? Technically, it's still safe either way.
Very equivalent.
I mean, equivalent in some equivalence class.
It doesn't really matter. So it's the thing that we're actually wanting here is built-in
predictability.
Right.
No built-in.
it's security. It's a thing that makes sure that there's a period that you can't just switch something over. You can't just like very quickly swap somebody's token ICO out, and now all of a sudden
You want to know
yours.
that
Well,
live
it's like the
domains
users would be
are
notified, so
probably
you're
gonna
gonna
get
get
renewed
both,
if they
like a person who owns the domain
Right.
and
It's gonna
getting
get
everyone's
everyone's
attention.
attention.
Built-in
Enough
protection.
time to
Built-in
do it,
protection,
fix
okay.
it.
Fail safe.
There you go. Fail safe.
Safe protection. Yeah.
There's the word. Naming things. I don't know.
That's the word.
Whatever. We understood what we meant.
Beyond.
Okay. Now what we could do is like just keep talking about generics, or we could speak a little bit more specifics. So, for instance, the auction system, right? If we want to have like this two set, we imagine that we have two systems, right? We want if you are the only person to own a domain, that then you can probably make a single auction, a single transaction, and that should be enough. But if the name is disputed, then not. There are many ways in which we can try to do that, right? We could switch from a blind auction to a more traditional auction where you put down an auction and then we wait a grace period of 24 hours in which other people can make other auctions, and then that has some sort of limitation so that people can, the auction cannot run forever.
So can I just ask if there were any other points people wanted to add to this first? And you had mentioned something.
I know there was chatter yesterday in terms of those pre-commitments for subdomain. So I think that's
So we
part of
wanted
this,
to facilitate securing subdomains.
How is that? How does that affect the top level domain?
It affects there are ways we could design the top level domain that make it either easier or harder for people to pre-commit to the security of their subdomains.
So one example of that was that anyone can renew a top level
Yes.
domain.
Okay, yes.
But you can
I'm still firmly against that.
Yeah, me too.
Why?
Because
It's really easy to grief. Now the griefing is not necessarily directly hurting somebody, but it's really easy to make things drag on artificially.
But you can still get
It's
the owner,
not, it's not too easy.
I
oh,
just.
and you can still give the owner the ability to revoke the domain actively.
I mean, but if
Or
renewals are
you-
long,
But you can do the opposite also. You can also create a contract that allows anyone to renew if you want it.
That's
But,
what, yeah.
no, but I
You
but I
don't
mean,
have to.
it doesn't matter how
You
long
make it so when you secure the contracts for your subdomains, they're secure even in the case of sale. It doesn't matter. So you could basically say if you started the auction period while the domain was like kind of going into limbo and it was sold, but basically if there was a way to protect those domains after the domain was sold and transferred, it wouldn't matter at all.
Well, if it expires, what happens if it expires?
Well,
Is it
so-
protected if it's
Everything
not
was
paid for?
zero.
So in that case, you would have to give the subdomain the ability to protect.
Well, that's what we're,
Yeah.
So, I think one way you can prevent griefing is by having checks on who you actually allow to register. So
You can say it's not anyone, but only a subdomain.
Yeah, or you say, like in our case, like, yeah, anyone can re-register it because we hope that if we forget to pay, someone will.
Well, no,
But in Piper's personal case, he's like,
I think it's a
You
future
know.
flag that you leave up to the contract that you
Yeah.
do.
If
I can
Because you're making a
imagine-
decision that's easy to make one level up.
I think you're right, because the reason that we originally proposed allowing anyone to register was because we were uncertain about the permanent registrar thing, but we had more or less solved that by our recommendation to lock up deeds until the registrar changes and to recommit. So, but would everyone agree that there are design decisions that will make it either easier or harder for people to provide guarantees to their subdomain holders?
This one feels like
Yeah.
the safety fault.
If it expires, doesn't anyone can remove it anyway.
no, we're talking about.
Only after a long fallow period, and then they get to completely
Well, if they-
control what happens.
But if it,
the
So-
subdomain,
you have to protect the subdomains past the renewal period then.
Sorry.
So if you protected the
We're just talking about if anyone can re-register a domain. So
yeah,
if anyone ever can call the contract that says, right, like re-register this, renew this, here's the money, renew it, or if only certain people can.
I think that should be up for the domain owner to decide.
That's what
Yeah.
I think too.
Yeah.
The owner of the domain is the ultimate arbiter of everything that happens below.
And then that means that it's as simple as creating a contract that has a function that anyone can call, and it's
Right.
called
So you get
the
to
register.
the smart contract that has the function, and then everybody can call that function on your smart contract that we use your domain.
Right, and like me, I could throw some money
Yeah,
in there.
hold on. Would anybody like to state an argument for the opposite?
What that
This
people would
isn't
be able
true,
to.
but like, is anybody, are we on board?
Yeah, my
I think we are.
only concern was because of the change of API, but we have resolved that elsewhere, so it's no longer necessary.
Right.
Anyone else?
My best argument against it, not to drag it on too much, was just the fact that we did already concede to that period of slight danger when upgrading and so forth. So if we wanted to try to evade that danger, it would maybe need to be solved at the core registrar.
I think we hashed
Yeah,
that
I know.
We established that we were so uncertain about what this API would look like that we didn't want to lock ourselves down.
So I agree, so we should just abstract. Right.
Does anyone have other?
I liked economic efficiency. Is that something we want to
Define economic
Yes, I
efficiency.
think that could be utility.
What do you mean economic efficiency?
So it was the notion that the correct owner should be paying as close to their price, or the smallest difference between
I think
with the unrealized
So
gain.
the person who's willing to pay the most ends up having.
yeah,
Right. Or at least, yeah.
So they don't need to
Trying
pay
to
the
avoid
most,
that.
ideally they pay nothing,
yeah.
and they get the, but they're still the highest bid, I guess. But that's,
Yeah, it seems like a far-fetched
Hard
one,
to
but
do.
if we can optimize for it, it would be
It's a
worth it.
metric, we're never gonna reach it, but we can.
Right, we can
always
optimize for it a bit.
Yeah,
I think it's worth value.
yeah. But that might be what utility is.
Okay, then we should,
Okay.
And I mean,
in case it's not explicit.
Yeah, I think one is
Yeah.
examples of how we want to achieve that.
yeah,
Okay.
because like somehow the
Yeah.
idea, the hypothesis is that the person who the squatter is gonna sell the name to would be willing to bid more than they were, which is why the squatter is guaranteed to have a profit from that.
Well, then
And so
for,
somehow utility in that, in the sense of people getting the names and efficiency, you can imagine the utility means efficiency.
yeah, but I mean, going back to option, I think what you're saying for me is a very good defense of the current Victory option system, right? Because then what we have is a system in which the person who is willing to pay the most
Right.
ends up winning the.
But if you miss that auction, then.
Well,
So
then if you didn't want people to be guaranteed to be able to hold the names, you just re-hold the auction every so often. And then you would have like you would have a pretty strong guarantee that as soon as someone who's willing to bid more, they would take that off your hands.
And I for one value stability over the.
Right, but it is interesting.
that would be the way.
And that's where like you just need your like own little ENS, like Vlad's ENS, it's just like all this like super crazy experimental stuff that like doesn't damage like the real ENS.
Can be simple.
I also think it's important that the person who values the name most long after the auction might not be the person who owns it, and it might be a good thing. Because you got my ether wallet.eth because they value it the most now in this wonderful hypothetical alternate reality. A year from now, some scammer might value it more highly because if they got it off new, they could then redirect all the money, all the incoming money to their own wallets. So it'd actually be worth more to the.
So
It would be worth more than
how
that,
much
yeah.
did the Mitre
Right, but
wallet
they won't make money
sell
by selling it
for?
back.
The top
They make
bid
money by
was
efficiency.
500.
Yes.
Oh, no.
So I think that's a great example. So the top bidder was for 500 Ether, right?
Yeah,
So
and
that's
they paid like.
that's like that's $50,000, like $100,000 almost.
Like that's what I'm saying.
So the interesting thing is that MitraWallet.com was at some point a domain that was valued at $10, right? And now it's a domain that it's valued at, I don't know, $50,000. And the interesting part of it is that the value that was created by the holder of MitraWallet.com.
Yeah.
So it's not that value so that name doesn't belong to the person who wants to buy it for
Yeah,
$50,000.
the issue is that the value isn't value that you make by having the name necessarily, because you're acting in good faith, you don't make that money, right? Or in some way, like the price of the name isn't the reserve price of my Ether wallet.
Although presumably the My Ether wallet folks do value it at $50,000 reputational damage, otherwise they
Right.
But
So
they
the
can't place
question
that,
is-
but they can't necessarily place that as a bid.
It may be worth as much.
Yeah, we would pay $50,000 for it, we would not pay $500.
Well, okay, wait, hold on. We didn't pay
You
50,000,
also-
never mind, so stop. We didn't pay 50,000, we didn't offer to pay 50,000. The value of it today is different than the value when the auction went on, just simply because like we had just monetized when the auction was happening and we had no idea how much money we would make from these monetization features and we didn't know what the value of our company. We still don't. Like literally we're up until 4 a.m. trying to figure out the value of my Ether wallet. So that's one thing. The other thing is that and this scares the crap out of me on the DNS level. And it's been like a point of contention the last few weeks, but like how much is myetherwallet.com worth to us and how much is it worth to someone else? And the question is, this is like freaking terrifying, so like hold on to your seats for a second, like what is the value of somebody getting myetherwallet.com right now? Like what would that value be? The value would be the amount that you could take from people.
Quite high.
It would be like,
How many thousands of dollars a second do you think?
that's the value of myetherwallet.com. And like that's why like I don't like this anymore and I want out. Like please help
It's
me.
interesting because
But I mean, it's
well, what he's saying is that for myetherwallet.com is worth more for a scammer than to a legitimate business.
That's right. Exactly.
Because if someone comes to you and gives like a check saying this is the amount of value I want to give you for like owning your business, it's a very different thing than this is the check, I'm gonna give it to you and you don't ask any question later.
Right. And so that's the thing that we've had legitimate offers for like, acquisition or mergers or like buying the business from other legitimate businesses, like other people in the blockchain space that are in a similar thing that would like to own my Ether wallet for legitimate purposes, probably. And those, I mean, hopefully, I don't know, but they're legitimate, they make whatever. Anyway, but those offers, right, those offers are always lower than a random yachmail.com email that emails us and says, hey, I'm prepared to sign a Bitcoin, sign from a Bitcoin address that has, like $10 million in it. Like what, would you be open to selling? Like, we've had 3 of those. And like, it's like, holy shit, like, it's a big thing. Like people are literally like, our business is not worth $10 million to someone who, well, I don't know, but the offers that we've received previously for like acquiring my Ether wallet brand and the domain and the company is less valuable than like some random Yachmail
The
dude.
malicious thing that you can do.
Yeah.
If you're willing to be malicious, it's worth way more.
And with that, I can totally concede that the repeating auction thing is like, participate at any time. Probably wouldn't work.
Because in the end,
I mean, in the end, the solution is like you don't ever put keys on my Ether wallet.
and I think in the end, what it
That's
means
the solution.
is that the moment that
Because then the value goes
Or
down. Like
basically,
the Fishers. Like the reason that this is able to happen right now is because like
people might get a weird version of your website.
because ETH grew faster than like our roadmap for like security of the ecosystem. And so now we're like, okay, let's fix it.
How do we get everyone on hardware wallets?
Yeah, like can we buy all the hardware wallets in the world?
I feel like what you need is like something that like just checks the hash of the HTML and like
Right. So the problem with that is that
Yeah, plug in or
users
something.
don't like you have to have a third party and then
Or
you
plug
have
in.
a third party.
Can you
Right.
guys write a really small browser extension?
Right, well you can use MetaMask now. So
No,
just
to-
do that.
To actually add you a second layer of when you go to myetherwallet.com.
Okay.
That's like
Yeah, just so that you go through the Chrome store. And so we have like the ENS kind of like.
Yeah, and we also
trust
have a Chrome
model.
extension. We can add anything to the Chrome extension. We have the phishing things. The reality is this, okay? There are a lot of things that we can do. The reality is this though, like users don't even look at the freaking URL. How can we expect them to go to a third party and install something or trust something in a thing?
Because the Chrome store establishes trust. You get like
Right.
reviews, user.
They won't even go to the Chrome.
They won't even go to the Chrome.
They'll never go.
Like,
if
you know,
they, install the plugin, then I'm pretty sure you can use it.
I mean, and then they have the only way.
People are just clicking random links they got from
They're not gonna go
Slack
to
and just throwing money.
It's like we're supposed to go already.
No, like, you can provide all the value you want. You can
You
provide.
take your own risk, although a lot of people get fished that way.
And that's the thing, is like, it's a real thing right now, people are losing money right now, and we tell them every single day on Reddit and Twitter and in 40 different Slacks to freaking install there's 8 different extensions you can install. You can install MetaMask, you can install ours, you can install the EAL, which is more lightweight, you can install all these things that they don't.
How do you make it a lot harder for people?
No, we literally just remove
Hold
the
on.
keystore private key, and they literally
That's
can't.
actually what I was just gonna recommend,
Yeah.
to deprecate keystore and private.
Yeah,
We are, we
that's
talked about this last
And to put in artificial delays for when you want to use those, that force you to sit there and wait for it to do work in the browser while you unlock it for a long time.
Just make them have to use an offline, like do it locally so that they
Seriously,
cannot do it.
it's like, hey, you really shouldn't be doing this. I'm gonna give you some time to write down a calendar entry for set aside time to get a hardware wallet. Stop, the shit's going away.
Yeah, I mean,
If the address is associated with the public key, the private key stuff is associated with the public key, then you just check the balance of the normal,
Piper.
do it in any order that is like most profitable.
Do you know who will not put those delay in places? The scam site
Yeah,
that they are on,
Absolutely.
right?
yeah, and this is the same thing with like hashing,
Okay, but
we
those
just play
people are
message.
already fucked.
Right.
But the people who are currently actually getting to myetherwallet.com safely on a regular basis,
Right.
this motivates them
Okay,
And this
to
is,
make, go ahead and make the decision right now. You can link them to both places and make it take long enough that it's like, if you go buy this, it'll be done really shortly after.
I just want to remember that we have 1 hour
Yeah.
and 30
And this
minutes
is a
left.
diversion.
anyways, yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, I don't know what we were talking about, but,
Let's talk about ENS.
oh, the value of ENS, the value of a domain.
Mostly it's because like the value of an ENS name,
Yeah.
once it's bought, it doesn't belong to ENS anymore, right? It belongs to the owner of the name.
Reasonably strong guarantees that as long as you follow the easy rules, you will probably be able to own this name in perpetuity.
Exactly.
That's
Right.
that's the 99.999 whatever guarantee that people have.
Yeah,
As long as they agree to follow.
So certainty
And I
for
would
us.
say-
But no more.
I would
This
say
is
that,
certainty
yeah,
and predictability.
yeah,
You know,
and I would say
I would definitely temper that with like, but don't think about using it for like, terrorism, that's too bad.
well, I mean, it's like, you can ensure certainty that like,
And
So like, there was like
Like,
reasons why,
wait.
maybe we would want to deregister names.
so.
But that's a second level solution now.
Not necessarily.
I mean, okay,
theoretical.
I don't think you're here for this one.
I don't mean absolute certainty, sorry,
No,
I
but-
mean a level of
But there was
certainty.
the way Nick said it, made me feel more certain the way you said it. The way you said it, it was cool, there were 9s, only 4 of them.
Look, if,
If you have 4 9s.
It's sort of the don't be a douchebag rule.
I mean, what's the point of,
Yeah.
If
You don't deserve,
being an
right.
asshole to
Oh, yeah.
everybody.
If you need to seriously consider whether or not we revoke your name,
Right.
then
Okay,
you
but-
probably should.
look, if if you own douchebag.if and it's not resolved anywhere, no browser will accept going into there, and you can send money to it, then it's almost the same as not owning it. You're just paying rent for something.
It's not if you spell that's the problem.
Okay, whatever. These limits stay
It's whatever it resolves to, and it's nothing, then it's fine.
The most, yeah.
Okay, and so should we talk about like auctions or things like that?
Upfront fees, are those in there at all?
I would say that they are part of like rent and.
Okay, so fees / rent, so
Yeah.
maybe we should incentive for utility rather than rent for utility then.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe we could have a separate list of just all the parameters we're talking about. So we could-
Okay, we could have that.
I think an initial, a totally burn fee separate from ongoing rent, separate
Oh,
from
yeah.
deposit.
I mean, there are a lot of like many separate like.
Not that many, I know we can listen.
I mean, just if we change the auction mechanism, we.
Well, one of them will be the auction.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk about the auction mechanism, right?
Yeah, but can we call it one parameter and then like
Okay.
get to like, once we.
I see, yeah, got it.
I'm gonna do that.
So, okay, parameters. So we can treat the auction mechanism, auction model. And I would separate that we can tweak the fees in the auction model. It would be like fees for entering, right? Fees for participating.
Yeah.
Entry.
Entry. Yeah.
Entry, yeah, fees, entry fees.
Participation.
Although I thought the idea was to control that with the registration. So
I mean, this is a knob, it could be set to 0.
Right.
right, but I thought the goal was to sit in the middle of the option based on the fee basis.
So I personally don't need any minimum bids on the auction. I don't understand why there is a minimum bid on the auction. I don't think that's really actually doesn't make that much sense.
Fair enough. I mean, well, I would say there is one now because there is no rent.
Okay,
And if there was neither rent nor
Then you would have an incentive
then
to
it would be
register.
free.
Yeah, so there, I think there has to be a cost.
Yeah, but if there's a rent, then you don't need a minimum bid.
Got it.
okay, so I would say like the deposit or burn would be one of the knobs that you can.
Yeah, which is basically the ongoing fee. This is an entry fee, ongoing fee. We could have an exit fee, but I don't know if that helps actually.
It's a parameter. It can be zero.
Don't incentives pay. That's
Well, yeah, negative fee for exit fee. But then you have to pay incentive to exit, having the
Well,
fees.
instead of saying that, I would say the rent fee, because the rent fee is what makes you go exit, right?
Well, so that's the recurring fee, which it gives you incentive to exit, but you can have additional one, which is that revenues from those things can be paid out to you when you register. So actually, that's a little bit.
Second level.
No, that's not second level because
You'd have to
the fees are, I mean, presumably being burned.
I'm saying you can put that.
Yeah, but I think that-
Second level?
I'm not
Yeah,
sure you can.
but I think
If
that is
the
a
money's
good
being
point.
burned, you can't.
Oh, okay.
Can someone check how many eaters we have on the zero debt address? I am curious to know that. Because, yeah, right now we are burning fees, so,
Yeah.
but if there is some sort of mechanism that we want to incentivize something, we could be using like that for that, right? We could, instead of burning this fee, we could have a pot that uses incentives.
Yeah, but it has to not be annual.
Yeah, exactly.
So I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
And it may be controversial, I don't know. Can we somehow propose changing that to a different multi-sig that's a lot harder to get into, so that we're not throwing away the opportunity to do stuff with that, but with a really strong commitment that we won't.
Oh, like manipulating the fees of the.
One, just to stop throwing it
Just stop
all away.
throwing money away.
Yeah,
I-
because
So
we
treat-
never choose to, like,
So
I
I
think there's sometimes reasons to make irrevocable choices, but we've already agreed to replace the thing.
So one of the proposals I would like to make on the linear and so on is to see how much agreement there is that we should actually send fees to an organisation whose job it is to develop and defend DNS.
Well,
I mean, or to incentivize any of the systems we implement for like people to use them.
Okay,
You have
so,
like a big pot and then people do something with it.
exactly, so here's an example, right? That's something that we threw around as an example yesterday, but I would like to go back to. So let's suppose that the auction model, we want to keep the auction model, the current blind system auction model. But let's suppose that we have some way in which that auctions are unsealed automatically, right? One way to do it would be to time lock them somehow. The problem with time locks is that it requires a constant proof of work in that you need to open up those auctions. So what you could have is you could have a pot which all the fees go into that pot, and that pot then is distributed to people who are constantly mining those auctions to open them.
But there's no purpose in making that a pot, is there? Because every auction needs a reveal. So every
No,
auction
there
has
is,
to be
because you
revealed.
need to target difficulty.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because we want to
It's just
target
the
the
difficulty
difficulty.
target.
But how does that help the
Because if you know how much people are willing to spend for a certain amount, you know how much there is in that like pool of
You can,
miners.
you can limit how profitable it is.
No, no, but
Nick,
if,
here-
stop.
Yeah, sorry.
If the amount that you have to incentivize someone to unlock a bid exceeds the amount that goes into that pot per bid, the pot is going to run out of money. If it's not enough, then it's going to fill up. So why not just pay for the reveal fee with the bid?
Here's why. I feel that all bids need to be reviewed, and that goes to that one guy that just wants his name, and that goes for that person who is like putting $1 million on a name. So I think it's fair that if you take, let's say, a 1% fee, you take it from everyone and pay everyone equally to have all bids reviewed, right? So that's why it's a common pot.
So here's an idea. You can reveal, get your money back, or someone could do the time lock crypto and take your money.
Sure. And like most
either or.
Right? Most bids are revealed, right?
Yeah.
And with this incentive, like it's not that many. You still lose your money if you don't reveal it, but there will be people who go pick up that trickle of
and the whole fee can actually be variant depending on the amount of people who are mining, right? So if suddenly there are a lot of people like opening bids, then that like partner fee can go be smaller or bigger. It depends.
It's still a little bit tricky because individual miners have to be assigned to an individual blocks for individual reveals.
We're talking about short enough amounts of time.
And
do
so
it in your browser.
3 days? No.
Well,
because it will be orders and magnitude slower, and therefore someone to reveal it early.
Yeah, you need to go. That's right. So basically, you need to be able to like set it up in your browser, and someone else needs to have to do it sequentially and have that take a lot of time. And so like somehow.
I have a question. Is there like a
like
I would say that this like change like is a fairly large change to like the game theory behind it. Like
it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm not even worried about that. Like I'm more worried about like is there some weird incentive or decentivization thing that would happen because of this?
Right? We are adding a miner
if this market for miners is pretty efficient.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
so
the
wait,
thing is
hold
like
on. What?
the miners would be motivated up to the point that it was not profitable, but if they became unprofitable, you just lose miners. Like
Isn't mining always a race to the bottom?
Yeah, it is.
Only if it's efficient, only if it's competitive.
Okay, so wait, I have a question. Why do we force people to lose their reveals in the first place? Like, why don't we just why don't we just do another thing?
Because that does affect games. If you aren't penalised for failing to reveal, then you can set a series of bids at different levels on an auction you want to punish someone on. You can wait for them to reveal, and then you can reveal a bid price just below that to force them to pay way more than they would have if it was an honest bid.
Okay, so in this situation, right, like in this situation, the reveal isn't, like the money for your reveal isn't lost in the same sense, like it's given to someone else. So does that open up the possibility for some?
If the market for mining is efficient, then they bear exactly the same cost as the revenue they got, and therefore it's that cost.
I want to point something out that it may not even be important for us to go too far into this because we wouldn't do this all at once anyways. We would still put a big locked multi-sig in front of that money during the time that we developed it. Like, if you want to hash out a mining idea, we can, but we have a next step right now.
Yeah, and this is a shiny, happy additional feature that I don't think is core to the future. You did ask a question earlier, how much was in the data trees?
Yeah.
Presently there's so let me start by saying, as of the 31st of July, there was 8,553 ether lost, and the data address of course contains that plus fees. The data address now has 11,573 ether and 0.0001 fuck tokens.
It doesn't have no fucks to it.
So up to 3,000 ether in fees has been paid. Some because there's a time interval between the figure I have here for ether lost and now. So the remaining 3,000 ether is either fees paid or it's more losses since the end of that.
So I like Piper's notion of having build a multi-sig and then we decide later. The problem with that is that there was a once it starts having like 8,000 liters, 11,000 liters, then there is some perverse incentive to like, oh, let's build a foundation for helping like the lawyers who want to protect the movie stakeholders.
Okay, how about this? How about this? Hold on, how about this? Make it a choice and the default is 0. It's an opt-in.
It's like a fee for auto review.
Do you want to burn it or do you want it to go to?
And it's opt-in. Nothing, if you don't make any action, it'll still behave exactly as it does now. You do not have to change to this.
Wait, is this on the user end?
As you register,
The burn it percentage is fine.
right, and people can choose. And it's a
Okay,
choice,
got it.
and then maybe it's nothing, maybe it's a plunge, but people chose to do it.
And you have
It's
to
gonna be a
default the
confusing,
burn
but
it
like-
after.
Well, we
I
can't, we
think
kind of can't default. You accept a boolean or a parameter or
Yeah.
whatever. The UI can default.
No, but what I'm getting at is that there's like across the board, like you guys agree to make sure that your
Sure.
interface,
I
like,
mean,
if nobody changes an interface, they will have to add this to the interface.
I mean, I
So the instructions are.
maybe this is radical, but I would fully support forming a organization with a charter that gives it restrictions on what it can do and just saying all of these go to that organization. I don't think that's outrageous.
I mean, I
Right,
think-
and
I
it's
actually
not,
think we
it's
don't
not
have
like
a
going
conversation.
to Reddit.
Sorry.
Like, it's not just like going to
Or
Reddit
if
and
you
like
do have a
nobody will
plan,
ever tell you that it's not like.
Well, that was my question
Fine.
yesterday, that if there was a cost, where is the ether gonna go and where does all
Yeah,
this
so,
go?
so at present, the cost is
Simplify the
just
system,
destroyed.
not
Yeah.
increase the
And that's
complexity. I think that it's too complex.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, but I
should
mean,
be
maybe
something
find
that's gotta
solutions to
steer
the
this
problem.
ship anyway,
Maybe
so
lower the fees,
it's
maybe
gotta develop. It's
don't
gotta-
lock the entire amount of the bill. I don't know, creative solutions, make it simpler.
okay, so,
I would be happy with no review at all, and I don't think that, I mean,
yeah,
I didn't think about it like long enough.
so it's true, we are sort of adding complexity in the system side, but to try to reduce complexity on the user side without changing fundamentally the option. If we change the option, maybe there could be some way in which there's no review is needed or something like that. But then we
That for me would have been like the ultimate goal. So get rid of the review, and then all that stuff is, for the user, it's.
yeah, but getting rid of the review means you cannot have a blind option anymore. And if you can't have a blind option anymore, then you have to think, okay, which option do you want then?
Maybe we can solve the problem of not having like refuse, for example.
Yeah, anyways, but just because we have a lot of parameters doesn't mean that it's complex, right? But I think why these parameters wind up being like 0 and something with a relatively simple rule,
That's
or
for the
like,
user, not the complexity of the system.
Oh.
Like, yes, like for the user, if the user needs to do more stuff and know more stuff, and
Yeah.
we can't even solve it on the client side.
yeah, but we did talk about having this intermediate layer, right? Like actually people who will serve as like, you know, I don't know, maybe like ECDNS or something, you know, where they'll end up like making these registries for users who want a similar experience.
We are talking about making the user do less stuff. When we are talking about mining and incentives and time blocking, what we are saying is that there is a way in which the user can do a single transaction, and he doesn't know that his transaction is sort of complicated, but he only does a single transaction, and then that gets unlocked automatically, right? And maybe, and of course, yeah, maybe that creates some sort of problems because now we have to incentivize someone to do the proof of work, etc. And then that's how we got to fees. But then I agree, we shouldn't be talking about what to do with the fees unless, and what behavior to incentivize, unless we know which behavior will be needed and what fees will be needed. So maybe we should talk about the other parameters.
I'd also like to clarify that I actually think even if some sort of organization got fees, I think failed reveals should still be burned. Because otherwise, whoever gets the fees has this perverse incentive to make it more difficult to use the ENS.
Yeah, that's there.
And here's,
Also, if you give it to the miners, they're exactly the ones who can make it more difficult to use ENS.
so let's talk. One of the things I know is controversial is the deposit. So I would like to bring that up.
Yeah.
Because honestly, for me, if you just kept the notion of like a very blind auction with a deposit and added a rent fee based on release, I would be super happy with the system. But maybe there are some good reasons not to have a deposit and have something else instead. My defense of the deposit is that the deposit is basically a burn that you can recover from.
Yeah.
So I think a deposit is always better than a burn, because by burning something, you're saying you can't recover it. And honestly, if I burn $1,000 in a name that you never get back, I'm not ever releasing the thing.
Right? So here's my calculus. When you burn it, you're distributing it to all the whales who own Ether. And giving them an unfair advantage through the burning. If you don't burn it, then you give the advantage to the whales who place deposits because they have lower cost of capital, right? And so the cost of capital for someone who has a lot of Ether is way lower than the cost of capital for someone who needs to spend that Ether. And so either way, when the whales are disproportionately benefit, right?
No.
But in the ENS version,
just literally not disproportionately benefit.
Absolutely
disproportionately.
No, because they have lower cost of capital.
No, for the burning. They benefit proportionally.
Disproportionately too small Ether holders.
Right, proportional.
Yeah, okay, fine. Fine.
It's what you're measuring for identity.
So I think you're right, unless we think about whether a user or a whale is burning, right? Because if a whale is burning feet, they end up redistributing themselves more than the user is, and so the whales get disproportionately favored by burning fees. So okay, they're the one burning.
What's
right?
your point?
So basically, my point basically is that like the security deposit thing is not disproportionately favored, which favors whales, because whales have lower cost of capital, right? Like it's easier for them to justify locking up any amount of Ether than anyone else, right? So the cost that you're charging everyone is different, right? It's not like everyone's paying the same cost over time, right? People who have a lot of Ether are paying a lower cost over time for the same deposit size. And so that means that like the cost, so you're saying it's good because it's an alternative to burning, but at least burning charges everyone the same amount for every name. Whereas with the deposit, you're charging people radically different amounts for every name. Because even if it's 10 Ether deposit on two different names, if one is held by me and one is held by a whale, we're going to have very different costs. Whereas if we're burning, it's the same cost.
I like a lot of things about the deposit scheme, but I think I underappreciate how big an effect that has. And yeah, some people have very low cost of capital compared to others. The other thing worth considering is that the cost for my Ether wallet to register my Ether wallet.eth is whatever their bid is, because they are never going to release it. But the cost for a speculator to register it is that amount over whatever period they happen to hold it for.
And that should be serious. It actually exceptionally works.
Yeah, that's
way worse.
That's a good point, actually.
Yeah.
Because I want to think that if you want to hold that name forever, then you would never release it at my back, right?
Well, we did talk in the
that's
past
bad, right?
about gradually refunding deposits if you hold the name for a while.
I like that idea.
Yeah, I was thinking
Time
that as
locking it
well.
on a
So like if
But
we were to
you still-
hold my Ether wallet for 5 years or something, like we
Yeah.
would get a certain amount back.
Or you get it has a half-life, you get
Right,
half back.
but-
Yeah.
The next question I asked was like obviously like, okay, does that incentivize squatters to just hold the name for 5 years?
Instead of
5 years is a long time.
Right, and that's the thing.
they'll do it for the first half-life.
Well, or they'll just sell it for a price that includes the that it's still locked.
Right.
They
I mean,
don't
that's
have to
always
hold
true.
it.
That's always true.
But it still has the issue that different people have different costs of capital.
Right.
On the other hand, that can actually be counteracted with yet another second layer solution. People can offer loans. They can say, we'll pay your bid in return for a fixed yearly fee because we have a low cost of capital and you have a higher cost of
Yeah,
capital.
but so that doesn't that mean the opposite also? Because
Where's the fee coming
Nick,
The fee comes from the whale, the investor.
Yeah, the decentralized
from? No, but how do they
loading
get
is.
paid?
So
How's the whale get paid?
the whale forms a contract which says if you pay us 1 ETH per year into this contract,
Yeah.
then you
So
keep your domain.
the whale needs to trust me to do that.
No.
How do
If
they
you
know that you'll?
don't, then they take the domain back and get the whole deposit.
Oh, okay.
Their loan is secured by the domain.
Okay, so the big cost, the uncertainty about whether or not this contract will last. Because like as soon as the other guy doesn't do it, then
Well, if you don't pay for your house, then it gets repossessed.
Yeah, sure.
It's like a loan.
It is.
Yeah, but-
Well, it's not. It's a low.
It's a loan where the other side is not allowed to reinvest it.
And the lender owns the collateral, like controls the collateral directly.
But it also means the opposite, right? Because if that also means that if you have like a large amount of money deposited, you can take a loan with that as a collateral, meaning your cost of capital isn't that much, right? I have $1,000 here. I have €1,000 Ether here. I can take some sort of loan, so I can use that 1,000 Ethers elsewhere while I have that. So it's the cost of capital is sort of very hard to define.
But we can expect both those mechanisms to make the cost of capital more homogeneous, because people with a low cost of capital will loan money to those with a higher one and must make a profit.
Any market for credit that leads like price discovery will kind of equalize people's cost of capital. But basically, like cost of capital is pretty well defined in terms of kind of like how much money you're willing to how much money you need as interest to lend me.
But then that does mean that if you're talking about very long time spans, having a half-life in which you can have part of your deposit back is something that can be solved, right? Because maybe Taylor doesn't mind having like 5 years holding that name for 5 years and getting only half of that for 5 years later. But maybe the Dutch guys will mind having to hold like for 5 years the same name, right? So that's an interesting way to think about.
But if they mind, they could just not hold it that long and get all the money back.
Right. I mean, the thing is that we're basically asking, does releasing money after a period of time to change anything, compared to the current system? Does it incentivize squatters in a negative way?
No, it seems like it doesn't affect squatters.
Right, and I would say that like if the period of time is sufficient, it's not going to affect the decision-making process of like squatters, because it's pretty much like the same situation that they're already in.
But the difference is that they have more capital available for squatting there.
Okay, so then maybe what you're talking about
If they hold for 5 years.
So the half-life only starts after 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As soon as the money starts coming in,
And I feel a long enough period of time to incentivize, because it's like, man, I don't want to hold it that long. Like that's
but then those things could be solved by the rent fees, right?
So because rent fees is so simpler.
Yeah. So no, my point is that if you hold the name, if that name has 100 Ethers inside there, and the rent fee is, let's say, half a Ether per year, then what should happen is that by the time that you want to take the money out, that money should be discounted for the amount of time that you spent it. So you pay the rent automatically with the. So my point is that there will be a deposit, and that deposit would basically pay rent automatically until it reached a point where it was zero. Yeah. And then when it's zero, it starts the grace period.
That makes a lot of sense. The way that I think about it is, you can think about it in terms of deposit or in terms of prepaid rent. Prepaid refundable rent.
Yeah, but is that
actually not refundable, right? So that's the question. Should it be refundable? The question is, do you withdraw before that drains, or do you have to be locked in?
Well, you can never withdraw completely, because you always will have to pay the proportional rent.
Yeah, no, I know. But can you withdraw like a few blocks after you register?
I think if we want a continuous rent model like you're talking about, then it makes sense to be able to abandon the name immediately. And if the winning price in the auction is paid outright, there's no reason to require people to hold a name for a certain amount of time. Because the reason we have a year minimum at the moment is because your cost of capital for holding a name for 10 minutes is almost nothing. But if you just need to pay it, then that actually incentivizes holding it for long enough to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, so
if there's no minimum, then we can actually do price discovery.
Now, if the deposit becomes the prepaid rent, then you do have to enforce a minimum period. Otherwise, somebody can just win an auction and then immediately today.
And then we win the auction and then keep the domain blocked because they have 100,000 Ether and keep winning the auction. And
They
then
can
releasing it
why winning auctions have no intention of keeping.
Yeah.
What is the disadvantage, or what are the disadvantages of a system that just exerts fees rather than deposits?
Burning seems to be objectionable.
Oh, set aside for a moment where the fees go. Assume it's the best possible thing you can think of. The sponsoring nature.
It goes to your favorite thing.
Yeah.
Okay, my point would be that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know what my favorite thing is.
Other than you.
No,
Because you don't agree on it. It's not an experiment, it's not a swap, okay?
Yeah, you have okay, we're on board.
What's your answer to that? What
Does
is
it matter what it is?
No, just
Wait,
assuming
where the
that
fees
we're
go?
paying for something, no.
No,
Assuming that they're going to the best place.
Okay, so my
Do we
point
have
would
a
that
problem?
be, so we know that there are people that are willing to deposit $1 million into an anchor, right? We don't know exactly why they're crazy to do that, but we know that they are.
Well, it's a safe
And
place for their.
so the point is, if the option is about burning, then, or about paying rent or anything else, my point is that unless we have like some sort of fixed and maximum caps, those fees can grow to be very large. in my opinion.
How is that different from auction deposits?
And the auction costs to be very large also.
I want to suggest something that I think fits this model. So right now, everybody's got a deposit that they could get back if they release the fund, right?
Yeah.
So we should be able to, if we switch over to a new registrar, everybody expects to get their money back eventually, right?
Or
So,
At the latest when they release the note.
right, the thing is worth that much ether in this amount of time, like, it's an objective fact. So we can choose to start paying them back early. That's something that people will be fine with. We can't choose to burn their money when they've expected to get it back.
Or we can write a new registrar, which if you agree to upgrade to
Sorry,
all the money.
we should not force them.
Well, no,
Or
to clarify, we literally cannot force them to do
Excellent,
their money.
excellent. So even with that, the new deeds coming out or whatever, or I don't know if we can retroactively figure out how to apply it to old stuff. Not sure it matters.
But you didn't pay rent.
The new deeds essentially just release your money back to you over a curve that does hit zero eventually, somewhat asymptotically maybe, I don't know. And we still let people get their money back, but we have on some timeline, and we can make it relatively long, incentivize them to eventually let it go once it hits zero, especially if that's like a whatever timeline, and they'll let it go. If they want to keep it, they can keep it at that point. But it's essentially, and it's asymptotic, so eventually it's not really worth very much.
But it's
Isn't your
also free
system
for them to keep it.
decreasing?
But every minute that they keep it, it gets less and less and less.
No,
You're
no,
decreasing
but
your
no, but
incentive to release it.
Say
You're
again?
decreasing your incentive to release it every minute that goes by. You're giving your money back anyway. Eventually it'll be cost you nothing.
Costs
Alright.
nothing, yeah.
Yeah, you
Maybe
have to upgrade it to either pay rent or burn, like that's like that.
So
would-
there's
That's
not
not needed, right?
But isn't that
It's
kind of the
putting
same
rent
as
into
paying,
the
as like rent to own?
Sorry, it sounds like you're paying nothing, but I don't understand how that is.
Yeah, the cost is actually used.
Like maybe if you added like an ongoing rent scheme,
Yeah,
and like after
Like,
a longer period, yeah.
When you're only back to the rent.
I think we're talking about two different
Maybe
things.
it's okay.
I think that there are two factors here, and one of them is you start with like that's your deposit. There is first like the amount that let's say this is the deposit, this is the amount you can take out, right? So one thing is like when as time goes by, the amount of you can take out goes up, but there's also rent, so that's your deposit. So in theory, if there's no rent, so this is the maximum amount you can take out. But if there's some sort of rent, then the curve should go something like this, where at every time you wait, there's less that you can take out because the rest you've paid in rent.
Aren't you just saying that your deposit gets spent on rent?
Yeah,
Okay,
and
but
it's-
You can also withdraw it at any point before, up to this bar, up to this amount. So they're saying you can't, your deposit is spent on rent, but also there's restrictions on how much that you can withdraw.
Right.
How does that fit with incenting people to release names at a time and the value to you to release a name at a
Well,
time?
I mean, now you have
That's
capital,
fair.
now you have a capital cost and rent in the story, and the capital cost isn't, infinite if you want to keep the name forever.
So what is the
Not
advantage?
infinite,
So we-
but, you know, I guess it's that.
So we were saying, if you add your rent to the deposit, okay, you don't take anything out of the deposit, when you release the name, you get it back, that increases your incentive over time to give the name back.
All right, well, that's true, but it also is like free. Oh, you're paying rent yourself.
Yeah.
It's like pretty much free. If your cost capital is zero, it's free.
Yeah, okay, so assuming you have infinite money, fine, but again, is there any other way to incent people to release the names?
Yeah, just charge them. Don't give them money. Don't give them money back.
Or show them,
Continue to charge over time.
show them how much.
That way, if they want to avoid future expenses, then they.
I don't think it is free, if you're not, you're paying rent yourself, you still have cost capital of what you could have otherwise done.
Assuming your cost capital is zero, is free.
That never applies in the real world.
Well,
There's always, you can always save.
I mean, it does sometimes.
Investing in
We
something
see
else.
negative interest rates sometimes.
So I still have a compelling answer for why this is better than a system where you just charge fees, where options cost money and rent costs money.
Okay,
I love that.
so how, the purpose of
But
this
it is a question of where that money goes.
No, that's the question we're delaying. That's the question we're not dealing with.
okay, so I think one interesting part is that I like the idea, but then it comes to how do the actions go, right? Because how much you were willing to spend to buy a name is very different. So the idea is I need to spend like $1 million to buy the name. It's different than I'm willing to pay like $10 for the auction fee to participate, right? But what I'm trying to say is that when you're doing an auction, the amount, if you just do that, there's no deposit, then what I'm imagining is that you're not giving the name to the person who is willing to pay the most for the name. You're willing to give the name to the person who is willing to give more to the auction house, right?
What's the difference?
I think well, probably at first the values will be different.
Well, what is the difference between being prepared to pay the most and being prepared to give the most to the auction house?
It doesn't matter who you're paying. In the auction, basically, you will give it to the highest bidder, and the bids will actually mean that you're spending that money. So the cost of capital differences won't really factor in that as much.
Yeah, I mean, the big advantage is that everyone has the same cost of cash.
Yeah.
It's $1 per dollar.
Yeah.
Well,
Can I
you
ask
still,
this?
you still value.
That, I
the more
think
dollars
that's
you
the
have.
thing, is that the money, is that you make the market less complex, which means that you don't get this weird, like artificial value being, I don't know.
You even out people's costs without the secondary capital market.
Exactly.
Right, otherwise people, you have to.
I mean, it's fair. I think that the deposit scheme was a reasonable starting position because we didn't know what we wanted to do with funds in the future. We needed to do some sort of cost to make people select the names that were valuable to them.
Right.
And earning all of that money seemed like a bad idea.
I like
but I'm not sure that what, burning it or the current system?
Burning it.
But I'm not sure. I don't see advantages to it as an ongoing system. If you assume for the moment that the fees go to the charity for buying your ponies or whatever it is that you prefer.
Yeah, I think that you cannot discount the issue on where the money goes. Because the minute that the money is going somewhere, the discussion ends up, it's not anymore like, oh, we've built this system that is nice and it's for everyone.
That's why we burn it.
And then it becomes something, oh, you're selling it, right? It's something that someone is making money out of.
Okay, so here's,
even if it's ponies.
it's really easy for us to point it at whatever address. We can decide right now that we are going to burn it. And if if there's a really good idea between now and then, and there's a level of broad agreement by the people here, like we can look into doing that, but right now.
I think the minute you decide that you will decide later, you're basically guaranteeing that that money is going to be going somewhere.
No, I think it could totally be burned. It's still in that.
I'm good
He said
with
because
the
everyone
default,
agrees.
I'm good with the default being that it gets burned, and we can set a like
I think
super
that
majority of people that are here that need to,
if
work
you
with this
change,
thing.
if you change where it goes and changes people's behavior, it's gonna change the decision making model. And like personally, like I'm not comfortable bidding on a name, knowing that it's going to multi-sig where there's no promises in terms of what it's gonna be used for.
I kind of agree.
I don't think
Okay,
most
so
people
just
know they're
foundation
burning their
Yeah,
money.
so- so I
Okay,
think-
so-
I don't think that most
That's
people
valid
using
point.
the ENS know that they're burning anything. I think they know they're paying miners fees and like that's
Does it change it at all if that is very clearly owned by a
No.
real organization with a
It
charter?
doesn't
I
doesn't
think
change it
it
at all
Okay,
until
that's fine.
Yeah.
Hang on,
Right.
until,
until I know what it's gonna be used for.
right,
So
but that's
for
the charter.
example, right, okay, well then maybe the answer is yes, but like, for example, if you said that it's going to the blind ponies, right? Then I would be able to make a decision on whether or not I think the blind ponies just like deserve the extra
Ponies
fees
don't
from
need
the
a
fee.
So
You
like,
know, but that's the thing, is like that's what it's.
I get it, and I respect
Yeah.
that, that's fine.
And I think that no matter what you do with the money, there's always gonna be people that are like for the ponies and against the ponies, no matter what.
Yeah.
So,
Someone's gonna hate the answer we give them.
right, so
Except
the closest you could get to, like a consensus style agreement where like the money goes somewhere and then that money goes somewhere else and everyone is in agreement is like, basically if you had you basically let everyone choose like where it went and like it didn't go just to the ponies, but it went to like, you know, one ETH went to this bug bounty and one ETH went to Taylor and one ETH went to Nick and one ETH went to the ponies and
It
like.
already goes to themselves.
Okay, but here's something. I would be really, I would think this would be a good idea if we had a system where we knew that the ENS system itself needed the money, right? If
Yes.
suddenly we know
That's another.
we have this system
Like the
where maybe for like insurance reasons or maybe for mining incentives or maybe for dispute resolution, right? If you create a system, and if you create the whole system and say, look, this is going for the dispute resolution system. It's going for
I think
to
that's
refund people
reasonable.
who get
I
fucked
think-
up.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
And also create thousands of nerds trying to put these lists together.
I mean, that's what
What does it
that's
create
what the
then?
charter of the
Gives a
hydro
job.
Well,
corporation.
It certainly feels like it creates.
So yeah, I mean, but
Yeah,
the
everyone
thing
else
is, like, I
experiments
think that it,
like to-
and I
See what
will not
creates
speak
the nerds
for
and
like all of Reddit and stuff, but I do think that it's more reasonable to like let people know that the ENS is trying to be like, you know, self-sustaining and that it has real costs and that these fees, rather than being burned, should go to those costs. And like we agree what happens to access, you know, funds. We have this charter and stuff, like we have a better chance of like not having like the world like try to blow us up for like the choices that we
here's an
power
idea.
made.
And you do a Twitter poll that's like, do
Oh
you
my
prefer burning?
God.
Do you prefer sending to us? Or did you not have any fuck idea that we prefer your money? Like that's.
Alright, I'll do
Then you
Twitter
get
poll.
incentive to actually attack the network and make sure actions don't finalize because you get money. Right? As a foundation, so you need to address that somehow.
Yeah, well,
Well,
that's
already
the point of the
suggested
foundation, right?
I
How do
already
the foundation
suggested
set
that
this up, like-
even if the foundation gets fees, it shouldn't get unrevealed bits for exactly that
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah.
I think those should always be burned.
Right,
Yeah.
At least they can be
Yeah.
determined to do so without screwing things.
I think what I'm saying is that I wouldn't like to go to foundation with a charter that we will create something later, but I would like to have like create that thing where the money goes to. And then everyone sees, oh, okay, the money is going here, and we know
Yeah,
that.
I don't know, but if we don't have a charter or a purpose, then that.
Yeah,
Well, that's what
I
Taylor was
wouldn't-
saying as well, write the charter first and then the
Yeah.
process in.
You have to tell people where the money's going and what it's gonna be used
Yeah.
for. If you leave it open, like literally, like I'll shit on you. Like I'll go on Reddit and I'll yell because they'll be like, we're like, that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable for a centralized or decentralized organization to be like, hey, we're going to make this change right now from being burned to putting it in our pockets, but we don't, and we're gonna figure it out later what we're gonna do with it.
And I'm not sure
I
what
do not want to
Money
be
was
tied to
spent.
the table.
Yeah, you would never buy tokens that the company could immediately then dump all of the value onto the market. That would never happen.
I mean, this is the thing, it's like, okay, yes, your average user probably doesn't know that things are being burned. Yes, that doesn't affect the game theory for those people that don't understand how the system works. And yes, that doesn't affect people who literally are just trying to get rich off these fucking tokens, right? But what it does affect is like, I don't know the people that I actually care about their opinions. Like, I care about the people that are building this network. I care about my opinion. I care about the people that like, do you know that the fees are being burned versus not burned? Like, those are all people that like, I think that we should incentivize to stay opinionated and stay in this ecosystem because it makes Ethereum better. Like, I would say that the people that don't know that it's being burned, taking advantage of them because of their ignorance is like not an Ethereum that I would like to like move towards.
Very much. Hold on. This is totally a thing that can be made completely explicitly opt-in.
Right, and that would be fine.
And in that model, as long as none of the current tools left on their own would ever put a single way towards this thing. But an interface that's been upgraded to can let you choose which place you want your money to go to, if you want your money to go.
But you're saying that one of those places would be like a multisig, which has a charter to build something later.
And if people chose to put an address in there, then they could start putting money towards whatever it was. You don't even have to, like, it's their choice.
Yeah. Well, I themselves and they're not really paying.
Who cares? I think if it's themselves.
I do.
Yeah,
Then they have no cost to register names.
Yeah.
No, but you don't have to let them give all of it. But I guess
Maybe you use the second bidder's address, just the second highest bidder's address.
Wait, I have a proposal. Okay. How about this? How about we schedule an AIP or whatever we want to do to figure out what that money would be used for, and then once we decide what it would be used for and see how other people react to that, then we decide that we cannot burn the money or we still have to burn the money. Like, instead of talking about like deciding that later, like why don't we just decide that now and then decide whether or not we're gonna burn it?
People are gonna hate that.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious that people are
You're gonna have to do more. You're gonna have to do a lot of planning. If you just like put an EAP out, you're gonna get trolled like crazy.
Oh no, I mean, okay, fine. Okay, so right now the plan is to stop burning the money and then decide what we're gonna do.
No, that's never been the plan. That was something somebody suggested, but I
Okay,
think most
what's
people
the
here
plan
think
right
that's no
now?
longer.
No, look, we don't have the option to not burn the money now. We only have the option of what happens on the next registry.
So I have a suggestion.
Okay.
What if, when people bid, we put their money in an account, and then later when we transition to the permanent registrar, they can either agree with what's done with the money, or they can take it out. And we already built that.
That's what we did. Yeah. Furthermore, I think that we've come up with a good mechanic for, like, okay, maybe we have some fees, they need to go somewhere. We can leave that as a pointer, and like as we come up with things that we might need to use money for, whether it's miners fees, whether it's incentive to free up accounts, whatever. Maybe we'll come up with some good sources, and then you have a full network, right? But right now, until we have good sources, let's just leave it as a pointer. Maybe it's a black hole.
But I think like there's like definitely some extent to which we like want to say that will be spent to the public good or for the public good, not for our individual enrichment or
We can have a mini charter pointer.
There's some kind of
like,
we agree that like this isn't just compensation for us, and if it is compensation for us, then it has to be like reasonably auditable invoices to some entity. That
It's a lot more. It's a lot more complicated than that. You know what? So because let's suppose we go into rent model, right? So every single business in Ethereum has an incentive to, like, if their business is making a profit, they want to keep the rent, right? That means that, let's say that there's a huge new Silk Road, and then that suddenly becomes 20% of all ENS names or some variation of a dark market. That means that whoever is on that multisig or whoever is on that foundation is literally making money out of drug money, out of profit money.
Yeah.
Would you like to be one of those people?
Well, hang on.
I think that.
You say that like it's a bad thing.
You know.
Do you hold the owners of the .org registry responsible for the registration fees for the Pirate Bay.org?
Yeah, so I don't feel like I would feel responsible for that at all, right?
Well, they are.
I mean, every single mission in your own registration.
I do say that like registrar.ru is like literally like profitable solely because of the fishing website they have, and like stuff and like keyboard and like I don't know how many legit domains are on that registrar, but like I would never see it. Like I've never Googled any name ever. Like that was like an innocent domain and like it says registrar.ru. Like it's only like scams and phishing and like terrible fucking things. So like, I do have like no respect for them and I think they're phishing.
Sure, and the moment that they are that, the moment that they have that, there's a good reason that you can say, okay, so there you should be start policing that, right? You should start taking those domains out because you make money out of them.
So far as they have the ability to do that in the system.
Yeah, that's right. And that's totally yeah.
So that's another reason
but also,
I don't think that the discussion should be we have this pile of money, what we can do. Instead it should be what money, where does we need money and where that money can come from, and it can probably come from that pile of money.
Sure, but you know, I mean, this isn't a case against like taking the money really in some way, because at the end of the day, we're facilitating that activity with the ENS, whether or not we're taking the money. So
yeah, but
so
there's a difference between like building something that happens to be like used by someone bad and like literally profiting from their evil deeds.
Yeah, many
but
points here.
Basically, like there's still gonna be like all the pressure to.
There's still gonna be that pressure, but like I would say that like the latter like is probably like jurisdiction and legal wise probably like a lot. You know,
just because you're using that money doesn't mean like you're profiting from it in an immoral way. For example, if you're using it for dispute resolution, you're basically getting malicious actors to pay for their own moderation.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
So,
but if we're paying all of us salary.
Exactly. That's
it's basically like if the money you charge them more than a registration fee or this dispute registration, like then you are literally profiting off of dirty money.
Sure. So you can opt out. Are we proposing everyone gets a salary? Oh.
I was just, throwing
I just
my on the table. Like I'm here, like I don't know, my time's valuable.
Moderating the foundation.
Just the fact that we have this discussion shows how crazy the system is, in which we build a system that just makes a fuck ton of money, and how many other organizations come together, like how
do we keep running this money?
How do we stop from burning this money? How can we not collect any customer data? How do we get rid of all of our power?
Blockchain wallet. You can buy a gun.
What about deposits? We thought about one argument in favor of getting the deposits back to the owners is that once Ethereum somewhere far in the future rises to a price much higher than it is now, then you might end up with names which have such a huge amount of deposit in it that they are, practically unsaleable because someone has to pay at least $1 billion to someone to get their name.
Yeah. So I think if there's a deposit, there's definitely you'll be able to get it back. But if that probably might be burned while you're paying rent. But ideally, if the price fees are going up, the cost of that should go down. And basically, it has to do with the algorithm that we use for targeting fees, right? And when I was talking earlier, I actually realized that it's a little bit with the 20% dark markets example. It might actually be the case that like 1% of names at some point ends up being forcing too many useful registrations off the network.
Well, then that's not just.
Yeah, but the question is like, how do you do that?
I was actually thinking about it, and we should stop tossing around the term 2%. Because 2% on registration per year would be insane.
They're actually shouting for it by mentioning it.
You refer 2 to 1.
No, it's going to be a really small percentage.
I think you'd be surprised.
Yeah, so I guess you have on the period also, right? 1% per year versus 1% per month is a big difference.
It's
Hey,
On
that's
some
good.
time.
As any loan shark will tell you.
So we're going in concert, so. Right?
Well, it depends on what that cost is.
Deregistration.
So we're more or less running out of
Like, you can balance how fast the rate goes up.
Yes.
I just think the optics of it are just really odd for starters.
If you can suggest the alternate feedback.
I'm like not worried about it.
No, but in the legacy system, you have to pay renewal fees.
What do you see?
Well, you have like a predictable renewal fee, but you don't target the
Right,
registration.
how do you make that good?
Well, they were saying until extended.
But you can't in either, right? You can't do that in either.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do the same in dollars, but you but in ether, you can't really do it.
Oh, you create a token, I said that.
Yeah, but what do you do? You create a dollar back token that's like backed by like some central party that like the ENS.
Right, like that's just all the same.
I guess I'm just saying, it's not you're saying that the deregistration level is really way.
I mean, I think we've had episode like, oh, and governance, of course, like naturally.
Because if
So
you're
maybe
all
we should, like governance,
to be stable, it has to have some form of feedback cycle. And that's the
Sorry, now I get it.
we got this.
All right,
Oh, and let's just keep bringing the money, even though we're just all this.
Yeah, because you know.
we're out of time.